All right. But if there's something you want to ask me about, then please do so. Has anybody in here ever lived in a third world country? No.
We're Stockton County.
Okay, California. You're doing good. Well, what I'd like to do to begin with this morning in class, I would like to take you to Uganda. I would like for you to see what it's like to live there, number one. And then during worship service, I want to tell you about the work that we're doing. And I don't think you can really conceptualize what's going on unless you understand what the living conditions and the environment actually is there. So my intention is to familiarize you with the country itself, give you a little background history to it, and hopefully you can see some of the changes that are occurring because of what God's doing. So I'd like to start off by giving you some pictures today, and hopefully the pictures will communicate and give you an understanding of the life conditions that are there. Everybody knows about the Nile because of the Old Testament, right? Okay, and you know where Egypt is. But when you go to Egypt and on the Mediterranean Sea and you follow the Nile River all the way down south, you'll come to Lake Victoria. And Lake Victoria is where Uganda is located, right on the lake itself. So it has a biblical connection simply from the standpoint of the geography of it. I always have a question of what's it like in Uganda. Everybody thinks it's extremely hot. It is not. It's on the equator. There are not any seasons except the rainy season and a wet season. And what's been happening here lately is they've been having too much rain, destroying crops, and there's a lot of hunger that's there. The other thing that people don't normally realize is there's a mountain range in Uganda. It's a beautiful mountain range, the Rwenzori Mountains, and it's on the western side of Uganda. Primarily our work up to this particular point has been in eastern Uganda, but last year, at the close of it, we started doing some things clear across the country, and I think you'll be excited to hear about what we've been doing there. So this will give you physically a view of what it's like. You will notice the countries around it. You know that Rwanda does not have a good history. And it continues to have problems with Uganda. The Congo does not have a good history either, and it continues to have problems with Uganda. The Sudan, where the Lord's Resistance Army periodically in the last 10 years had come down south and had captured the kids, trained them in the military to kill people. So during this time, everybody on the border that had kids sent them to the town center so that they would not be captured by the Lord's Resistance Army. So it has a history. It has a history of a lot of turmoil. Uganda does, internally and externally. And some of that is still alive today. I keep pushing the wrong button. I'd like for you to think a little bit about religion in Uganda. And the thing that I would like to highlight for you is what is called African traditional religion. And we call it witchcraft. Witchcraft. And witchcraft is alive. It is a problem in the country. It continues to be a problem in the country. And they have not done much with it until recently. You can see what the sign says. It's talking about witch doctors. And nothing has really happened until just recently in 2021 where they passed a law saying that it was against the law to take the life and sacrifice a young child. And so a witch doctor will tell you if you've got a problem, if you've got a bad back, you need to sacrifice a of chicken. You may want to sacrifice a goat. And the blood is powerful, but the most powerful blood is the blood of a child. And that is the problem. And so in the villages, children have a tendency of disappearing. And that is a historical problem that has been embedded in the country for a long time. It is still there, even though government has passed a law to hopefully try to mitigate that at some particular point in time. I'd like for you to meet Orini. Now, James Akumu is the individual that we have been working with for over 20 years. And James converted him. And I want you to look at what is underlined on his certificate. This is his official government certificate. The government issued that. And the exception, he can do everything except what? Human sacrifice. He can do anything, but don't take the life of somebody. So you can see how African traditional religion is embedded in the culture. Kids are sometimes disfigured, facial features have been cut and disfigured. And so that is not unusual. And again, that is a problem. It is not uncommon for you to go into a town center and see a lot of people gathered together around a witch doctor who has a bunch of snakes. And I remember one day when my daughter and I were visiting the village, that was one of the things that was interesting for us to observe. But those kinds of things have occurred and are still reoccurring in the country itself. He came forward, James sent a picture. He was baptized in the swamp. James gave him a Bible. All of his paraphernalia was dug out of his hut, and he burned it, and his wife made sure it was completely burned. So here she is with a stick, ensuring that it has been burned. So, as far as I know, this is the first time, at least James has told me, that an individual practicing witchcraft was converted to the Lord's church. This gives you a kind of a brief history of Uganda. And it shows you when Islam was brought in. It also shows you when other religions came into the country. So Islam is there. It is pretty well grounded. You do not normally find it in the villages, but sometimes you will find a group of villagers that are practicing it. One of the things that I want to mention to you is the 82 to 92, that after religion came in, what do you think we had? A war. Now you would think that is something that shouldn't happen, right? But religion is something that can be volatile and can be volatile to the extreme. And that was one of the things that happened in the country itself. United Kingdom or England took it over for a number of years as a protectorate, and things kind of calmed down. But as you know, people want freedom to do what they want to do. So independence was granted, and at that particular time there was a struggle for control of the government itself. And that struggle continues even in spite of theoretically democratic elections, which maybe are not so democratic. But you can see the changes in government. You can see that government was taken over in a non-peaceful way as the changes occurred. So this is not a good thing for the country itself. One of the things that I want to highlight is Mussolini, who came in power in '86, but who is still in power. And that asks the question of whether or not this is actually a democratic government in itself. So he has been in charge for a number of years. They've had basically 2 wars under his reign, I guess you would say. And we still have problems with Rwanda. The last time we were there, when we flew into Rwanda, but we did not know that the border was closed. So the border now is open, but the conflict is still there. It's a very much a hot zone that we weren't aware of when we came to Uganda last time. You can't really talk about Uganda and politics without talking about Idi Amin. Does anybody know anything about Idi Amin? Okay, all right. Well, he's not a good guy, and that's a kind way of describing him. I'd like for you to look at his title that he gave himself. Just take a second, look at the wording, and think about the mentality of the man that bestowed this title on him. Lord of all the beasts, conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general, and Uganda in particular. So I would hope that the title he bestowed on himself would give you kind of a small idea of what his psyche was really like. One of the first things he did was run off all the missionaries, period. So what do you think happened to religion? The only thing there was witchcraft, right? That's a good point. Somebody said something else. Yeah. And then the folks from India, the Indians that were living there that had devoted their life to it, were thrown out, and their businesses were taken over and their bank accounts taken. So that had a significant economic. So there was a significant economic and a significant religious impact at this particular time because of this one man himself. The SRB. Everybody knows what the Gestapo is, right? Well, the SRB is a newer version of the Gestapo. And it practiced the same things that Hitler in Germany did during World War II. So its pink house in the Capitol on the side of the hill still remains. There's a museum there. And this is where a lot of the torturing and taking of life occurred in this house. The best estimate is 300,000 people were killed during this time period. So this time period was not peaceful. It was not restful in any way. People feared for their life. There was one man in charge, and he controlled the SRB, which controlled everything in the country itself. So when we talk about some of the anecdotal information related to him, heads in the refrigerator, and body parts that were eaten. Now, I cannot document that, but there is anecdotal information saying this was Idi Amin. Not a good man. This is his torture chamber. It's close to the pink house in Kampala. And if you'll notice, it has a way in, and that was flooded. And there was no gates or barbed wire or anything. You had to enter and leave with the boat because the water was electrified. So nobody would dare get into the water. They didn't have to worry about having guards or anything. They were all contained, and there was no problem with escapes. So this tells you a little bit, I think, about the man itself. The scars still remaining. I remember driving down the road and seeing that tank on the edge of the road. That had been there for probably 12 years at the time that we were there when I took a picture of it. So there are remnants of that everywhere in Uganda that are kind of monuments to what he did to the country itself. despite all of this, I think it was Winston, yeah, it was Churchill that called him the Pearl of Africa. So it's a wonderful, beautiful place. The people are great. And Debbie and I have some of our closest relationships with Ugandans. We have a relationship with them now very close to 20 years, and they're family. That's all I can say, they're family. I want to show you some things that we saw to emphasize this. Remember Lake Victoria that I told you was right around Jinja? This is a picture of the lake. And, I'm sorry?
That's African Queen Lake, isn't it? Lake Victoria?
Yes. This is the Rwenzori Mountains, and this is the area that last year we started working with Christians in this area. It is difficult to get around, obviously, because of the mountains. The roads are terrible, and the rainy season things are almost impossible for you to be able to get things done or to move. This is one of the falls, Murchison Falls. It's probably the largest, well, not probably, it is the largest fall in Uganda. And when we were there, our first time, we took a trip around the perimeter of Uganda. This is a beautiful place. Sidi Falls is not as magnificent in terms of its size, but in terms of the topography of the falls, it's a wonderful place. Am I stuck?
No, it's good.
Ah, there we go. Okay. Everybody's heard of the great apes, haven't you? Well, this is a reserve form. And we didn't visit the great apes. We visited the great chimpanzees. And I have the pleasure of the alpha chimpanzee charging me. And so, and the guy that took us in said that they charge, just stand perfectly still. But interestingly enough, I wasn't scared because I didn't know he charged me, because I was taking a video of him at the time and I didn't realize how close he had gotten to me. So, a little personal story related to that. But the topography and the vegetation differs greatly from the east and the west, with the plains kind of in the middle. So it's not unusual to stop on the edge of the road and see animals in the distance. The middle one up there was taken out of the window of our car, thinking that we had something to feed them, which we did not. But the animals are in game preserves without fences. So obviously they move outside of the boundaries of the game preserves at various points in time. Now that you've seen both the tragedy and the beauty, I would like for you to look at some of the differences in their life compared to your life. And so I'd like for you to think about you inserting your life over there and living in a daily basis and seeing what it is really like. Life expectancy is up considerably from when we were over there 20 years ago and staying. So there's been a big change. But AIDS is still a significant problem. And some people feel that the HIV/AIDS virus started there, being transferred to humans when they killed monkeys, and some of the blood infected them. That's not something that is documentable. Again, it's anecdotal, but a lot of people feel that this is the locus of origination for that terrible disease. And when you start thinking about it, 1 million people have died, and when you start thinking about adults dying, what do you think about the kiddos? That's, okay, there you go. So, HIV has significant impact in terms of the kids. And Uganda, well, I must say one thing about Ugandans. Ugandans take care as best they can of orphans. So James Akuma, which we'll talk about later, had 2 brothers die, so he took in 2 wives and all the kids and raised them and took care of them. So that is a cultural heritage that family is very important. But the problem is the economic side of absorbing that into family units is almost insurmountable for them. So that is a significant problem. Jobs, we sometimes think of jobs in this country. Some of us may feel it's plentiful. Some of them feel that maybe they aren't the most desirable. Some may say it's hard to get a job. But I want to tell you there are no jobs in Uganda. You have a piece of land and you can plant a crop. And you can sell or feed the produce from it. It's basically the only way that you're going to make a living, other than the metropolitan areas, if you call them metropolitan. But when you go to the village, there are no jobs. The most precious thing you can have is a piece of land, because it is where you live from, off of, and how you provide funds, limited funds. And normally, money doesn't exchange hands. It is a bartering system of you having something that I want and we swap out. So it's a different mindset than what we have today. We've tried to stay out of medical health because the problem is never ends. And once you start it, once you say yes to somebody, there's going to have to be a no somewhere along the way. And when we went over there 20 years ago, that's basically what we did. And that's a hard thing to say no. This individual here, he was a member of the church. The Albiano was dying because of the goiter in his neck, and he couldn't eat. So he was slowly dying. And James and the team that I work with over there understands our position, but he obviously oftentimes floats these things back to me by email. And some members of the church heard about Fabiano, and they paid for his operation. It is interesting that we just had, when he came home, the weekend he came home, we had just finished building a church building for that congregation. And James said that Fabiano made a great testimonial about what the Lord had done for him on that Sunday. So we try to stay out of that. We have violated that, and it's, like I said, a hard thing to say no, and try to focus on spiritual health and not medical health. If you are a girl or a woman, you're disadvantaged. That's it. You live in Uganda and you're a female, you're a second-class citizen. And if you're a male, you are superior. You are very directive and authoritarian. And you paid a bride's price for this wife. Therefore, you own her, and she does all the work. So when you go to the village, who's digging in the garden with a big hoe? Mom. Yeah. So she is there to serve the man. I'd like you to look at some of the percentages. Physical violence, 48%. %, sexual violence. The illiteracy in females are not, we don't care whether or not a female is educated or not. Think about that. So that is a culture that is embedded in Uganda that comes in conflict with what the book says. And that is a difficult barrier for us to break. This is life for a young lady or a mother. I remember the first time, the very first time, my daughter and I went to a village on Sunday. And I'd never experienced it, but when a woman, an elderly woman, greeted me, she grabbed my hand and kneeled. And I didn't realize what was happening, but she was trying to pay me great respect, obviously. And I was embarrassed that she was kneeling in front of me, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted to ask her to stand, but there was a language barrier because I could not speak Wasoga. So my culture came in direct conflict with Ugandan culture. So life is different. The women that greeted me today was a whole lot different than how I am greeted in Uganda. The other thing that I want to emphasize is if I was the Ugandan, and if one of you didn't greet me this morning, I would be insulted. So, if I was here this morning and I was a Ugandan, I would expect everybody today to greet me. And Ugandans take this very seriously. I remember when we were there that Debbie and I experienced two women in the church that were upset with each other because of the greeting process or the lack of greeting, and ignoring one because they were irritated. So fellowship and greeting is very important to the Ugandan way of life. These are some of the common words. Ebi balloon. Things biting. Do you have anything biting you? Anything on your mind? Anything disturbing you today? Do you have a problem? Things biting you. So it's kind of interesting the way they phrase things and how it is translated into English. My middle daughter is much better, speaks pretty fluently Wasoga, and it's a beautiful language. And it's something that has to be dealt with when you go into that culture. Now, English is the primary language. It's the national language. But when you go to the village, what do you think about the women? Uneducated, so what do they know? Their own language, that's it. So it's very difficult for me to communicate without an interpreter. So again now, if you go with a good heart and you try and tell them the story of Christ and what He's done for you, you can't do it, can you? So how is the woman disadvantaged? She can't hear the story. And her soul is at stake. So it's an important issue. Now, if you go into towns like Jinja, houses have fences, and they aren't our fences. They're a wall, and at the top of them you'll you'll see barbed wire, you'll see glass embedded into the concrete. You'll see people 24 hours a day that secure the perimeter that are hired. Why? Because of safety concerns. Ida wrote us the other day, and Ida said that in her village, and she's one of the women we work with, and we'll talk with her and just talk about her this morning later on. But she was worried, and she has double padlocked or triple padlocked entrance areas simply because of concern that somebody was breaking into homes and raping the women. So safety is an issue that is significantly more important, I think, to them, and they have to worry about than it is in our culture itself. This may give you an idea of what the police force looks like. They look paramilitary. They carry automatic weapons, and some of them are basically young boys. And the first time we were over there, it bothered me a lot, and we've gotten used to it. But the last time we were there, Debbie and I got separated, and I made a terrible mistake because I got separated without my passport and without my driver's license. And Debbie and I could not get back together for a long period of time at the airport. So whether or not it's the police or the military or simply security guards, you need to be very careful around them. If you're a child, this is the way you're raised. My grandsons have been raised on Legos. There's no Legos. I haven't found any Legos in Uganda. Yeah. Three of our grandsons, well, four of our, well, probably all of them. All of our grandsons have a Lego problem. But that kind of problem is not alive in Uganda. So this gives you an idea of what it's like for kids. This is what it's like for water. You'd be lucky if you have a well. Generally, it's the swamp. And who gets the water? Dad does all the time, right? No, Dad. It's the kids and the women. So this is a normal activity. Pretty well anywhere you go where there is a water supply, this is the gathering you will find. Now, if you go to the town centers, they usually have a market. You can find almost anything you want. Pork joint, fresh meat, all kinds of vegetables. You can even have grasshoppers up there in the upper right-hand side that was offered to us, which is a delicacy. It's kind of like dessert. Matoke, cassava, posho, rice, and beans is normally what is consumed, normally what the diet is of the Ugandans. Considerably different than ours. Meat is very seldom, you very seldom find meat, unless there is a special guest and they usually kill a kitchen that has almost no fat on it at all. So hunger is something that few of us experience, but if you live in Uganda, 29% of the kids under 5. Think about that. 50% of the adult population. Most Ugandans are very small, very short in stature, very short, and it's because of the lack of food. This is a traditional house. It's a mud and manure that has been mixed with water and thrown against the side to perform the sides of the structure. Transportation is dangerous at best. Roads are terrible but never maintained. There's no lights on them. Sometimes there's no center line. You drive on the wrong side of the road with a vehicle that has the steering wheel on the wrong side of the road. You get used to that after a while. But the people driving are not trained very well. And sometimes you meet another car on the road and they will flash their lights and they're passing somebody and they're in your lane and they expect you to what? Hit the ditch because they're coming around. So that is a common thing. It is something that is oftentimes unheard of. Vehicles are always overloaded. These are the bicycles. And if you look at some of the loads on the bicycles, you'll see that anytime you are going from one place to another, that instrument is always overloaded. The motorcycles, the 50/50s, gives you an example of what they carry on two wheels. Dangerous? Oh, yes. A matatu or a taxi. And when there's no room inside, you just hang on to the outside. So does anybody want to take a taxi in Uganda? You think you'll pass, right? The most common form of transportation. But when you're walking, it's not with empty arms, or not with something on your head, or not with something on your back. And is there anything that's curious about who's walking and what they're carrying here? They're what? Yeah, yeah. Have we got about another 5 minutes? Yes? Okay, I want to show a video in just a few minutes. This gives you an idea of differences in congregations. The first one up here on the left, this was the very first time my daughter and I went to the village. It's the first time I preached under a mango tree to this group that was gathered. So you can see the second one is maybe a little better, but you know what? Termites are terrible and they'll eat anything, and wooden structures never last. The one on the right is a little better yet. Now, bottom left is pretty good, and this is what we're building on the bottom right now. So you don't come to a nice building like we have today. You do not have PowerPoint. You do not have lights. And you do not have air conditioning. And when our plates pass, we usually put paper money in it. But when a bowl is passed, you get all kinds of produce that is placed in it. Nobody has any money. No money. This woman here gave land for the church building. We don't build church buildings unless we have a plot of land that has been donated to the church. This woman gave her most precious possession. Remember now, the most precious possession that Uganda has is their land. And she gave a parcel of that to the church so a building could be built. And Ida, which is a soulmate of Debbie and our daughter Erica, made this comment to Debbie about how hard they have to work and how she can't do it anymore. Here's a group of women that walked 29 miles to Uganda because they wanted to attend the Sober-Wide conference. I'd have heard about it, met them and walked with them. They didn't have money. So the only way they could go was to walk. This gives you an idea of what it's like to eat with them. Debbie and Ida are over here. And the Toki beans post-show. And they will give you a basin of water to wash your hands in. and then you dig in and eat with your hands. And this is something that they value. Meals in common and fellowship is biblical, by the way, isn't it? Very biblical. Oftentimes in the church today we miss that, but it's biblical. Baptisms are different. One of the ones that I want to highlight to you is that James had a number of people that weren't close to water, so he had to go rent a lorry or a small pickup and take them to Lake Victoria to baptize them. Most of the time they are simply baptized in the swamp itself. I want to take you to worship services at Wantangi. This shows you something about what you meet on the road. When they want you to stop, you need to stop. There are animals on the side. This is kind of a village center. So we're still on the main thoroughways, getting ready to turn off of them. This is where all the taxis are. Modified bicycles. This is some of the better roads going into the village. And you can imagine what these roads are like in the rainy season. They're in very good shape now. Again, the heavy loads, unexpected things you can find on the road. And as you go into the bush, they become narrower and rougher. Again, traditional homes. This is the Wantangi Church. This kind of gives you an idea of what it's like to be in church on Sunday morning. I think it shows you the differences in the way they worship and the way that we worship, yet there is a common thread to it, and it is biblical. I don't know what your portion is. I hope it's the Lord. I know it is sufficient. I hope you think it is sufficient. Oftentimes we're a complaining group of people in this country. One of the things that I have noticed is the degree of happiness and the lack of complaint about the Ugandans, especially when their portion is the Lord. I've talked too much and I haven't given you an opportunity. Is there anything you need to say? And I'm probably running out of time. Anybody want to ask a question or make a comment? Is it safe? I think it is safe in most of the places we have gone. It's safer in the villages than it's safer in the larger cities. I think think as you move towards the borders of the country, that's where most of the violence occurs. And when we took a tour of the country, we did take a little risk and get a little closer to the border than we would like, but we felt secure. But you want to be careful. Anything else? Thank you all.